Welcome to another episode of What Works for Me, a podcast highlighting best practices in Christian schools. This podcast is produced in partnership with Lutheran Education Association. To discover how LEA supports Christian teachers and schools, visit www.lea.org. My name is Mike Sheeman. I'm the Executive Director and Head of Schools at Trinity Lutheran in Bend, Oregon.
And I'm Rob Lunak. I'm the Superintendent of Lutheran Neighborhood Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we have a really interesting and I think important topic today. And before we get into that, we're going to introduce you to the great person that's going to lead us through that topic. So today our guest is Angela Shirley. Angela, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you give us a little intro about you? And then I'm sure Mike will get us right into that topic.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a real honor and privilege to be talking with you guys today. So thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. So I'm Angela Shirley. I currently serve at Christ Community Lutheran School in St. Louis, Missouri. So my ministry started almost 30 years ago. I went to Concordia River Forest and got my master's from when it was Chicago, though. So I've been to both. But I started in educational ministry, teaching elementary, loved that, spent a year in middle school, not necessarily my gift. I was wanting to get back to the little ones. So then I became the director of an early childhood program there in Tennessee, where we had lived for about 17 years. And then, as God does, he called me up to St. Louis to be a part of CCLS. And so I'm one of the four administrators that oversee the early childhood program and the four campuses of early childhood that we have. And then we have elementary and middle school as well, along with our executive director. So I've been there since 2013. And so coming up on that 30th anniversary of just being a part of Lutheran ministry. Love it.
Well, congratulations. And what a gift that is that God's been using you for so many years to touch lives. And you continue to do that. And it's interesting how our connection happened here. So Angela, I attended your breakout session at the LEA convocation back in October of 2025. And I was really impressed because you were tackling a topic that I think is very relevant for absolutely anyone. We all know that we love to come to work and things just go along swimmingly, and our parents love us all the time, and the students never engage in conflict, and just things go perfect every single day. But we also know, realistically, that's just not true. And so even the title of your breakout got me intrigued because it was approaching difficult conversations with courage. And what really snagged me was that we are first approaching these difficult conversations. We're not avoiding them, but then to do it with courage. And you unpacked all of those things. So do you maybe mind starting us off just with a little bit of an overview of what you shared at the convocation, but then anything else that you might want to share about how do we, as Lutheran educators, show the love of Jesus even in difficult conversations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is, three decades worth of really tough conversations. And you, as a teacher, you have to sit down and have that really hard conversation with a parent. You have that really difficult conference or tough information to share. As an administrator, you're, blocking and tackling for your teachers all the time. But we come upon really difficult situations, with parents. And so it's something that I'm really passionate about. I wanted to find a way to have the conversation that makes you feel like you have a pit in your stomach and it just feels icky. So I thought there's got to be a way to do this. So over time, it's just something that kind of developed. I think at first it kind of was accidental, but then I really started researching about how to do that well and to make sure that, we're not attacking the heart and the spirit of the person, but we're truly getting to the heart of the issue that we're dealing with. And so to avoid those conversations, I say all the time to my team, silence is acceptance. So we either have the conversation or we say what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're acting is okay. And I'm okay with it. So if we don't want to accept the behavior or the direction that the relationship is going, we have to sit down and have it. So how do we do that in a way that we're going to be well understood and not misunderstood? How are we going to be kind, but also clear? And how are we going to make sure that we're on the same page? Because we've all had an email that we misunderstood or a text message that we received that we took it completely the wrong way than the sender superintendent. So it's kind of taking all of those things together, and then knowing also that, really the heart of the conversation is going to come from the heart. And that's where that courage comes from. And so really seeking the Lord's direction in these conversations is really how all of it kind of evolved. And so I think what it was developing a process that was going to be practical, replicable. I was going to be able to do this every time, no matter what conversation I was having. And I've, just seen some success as we've kind of applied these. And then as I've taught it, to my team or to our, admin and lead team, it's something that really can apply not just in an early childhood setting at all, but people who have had to talk with their pastor, who's part of the church in their ministry, or who have had to talk to their administrator, or those really rough parents that everybody's nervous to talk to. It's had a lot of success. So
I really like that frame, that if you aren't going to say anything about it, you basically are okay with it. And I think it's so easy to say, it's not worth my time today. I don't have the energy for it today. You can come up with any reason you want to not have the conversation. But by doing that, you're basically telling that person what you did was fine, right? And we like to assume, like, doesn't everybody know that their behavior is not okay? Doesn't everyone know the right way and the wrong way? And Mike, maybe you have different experience than me. I can say that some people don't know. They just, that's how they interact, and they get away with it all the time, and no one ever says anything to them, right? And so I really like that beginning approach to it, that what we allow, basically, what we don't say anything about is what we accept. That's a great frame.
mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, sorry, Angela. I was just going to say, one of the things that you highlighted a little bit in your breakout session was the difference between aggressive and assertive communication. And I thought that was really a good differentiation of how you're going to approach that, because you already said something about how it's you're not attacking the person. You don't want to go after the person, but there is that level of assertion. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your successes in maybe witnessing both, and how you identify them, and how you train people? Really, what are the tips of the trade to be able to say, this is how we get to the point we want to get to, without backing down or changing what we want to do, but clearly communicating?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the communication piece is such a fundamental part of going into these conversations. It's something that we have to think about before we even start, because I want to think about that person's frame of reference in mind. I want to think about what lens they're coming from and where I am coming from. And so I have to think about the type of communicator that I want to be. And I want to make sure that I'm not being a passive communicator. I want to be assertive in what I'm saying, and understanding that clarity is kind. Dialogue is always an option, and so going into it with that mindset. So if I go into a meeting incredibly defensive and aggressive, and I'm going to come at this parent, what do I expect to receive back? I'm going to get that same level of defensiveness and so on. So we want to make sure that we're speaking in a clear way, that I'm thinking about what I'm going to say before I say it. And when I say that, that's part of the planning process, because I want to think about the communicator I want to be, and I want to know what I'm going to say no matter what I encounter during that conversation. And so out of that has truly developed a template where I literally sit down and I write out the conversation that I have to have before I ever have it. And this used to be it's a template. And I think about, how do I want to come across? What do I want them to understand? What do I want the outcome of this meeting to be? What are the three most important things that I need to say during this conversation? So I plan it all out. And I do that by, there's a template that I created that I shared at the LEA. It's really just writing down those 3 points that I want to make sure that I get across. And by writing them out, I'm thinking about, how do I want to say this? I want to be clear. I don't don't want there to be any misconceptions about, where we're headed or what we're talking about today. So you communicate that in a very assertive way. I'm going to say, hey, this is what we need to talk about today. These are our three things that we're going to, go through during our conversation. I don't come to them with 17 things. I come to them with no more than three things, or that sets up a meeting to be really defensive as well. Um, and then I think about, how am I going to start this meeting? I want to make sure that we're aligned in our goal and what we're hoping for the outcome to be. So I'm saying, literally writing out, how do I want to start this meeting? What are the three things I want to say? And then the other piece of difficult conversations, and I think the reason that we avoid them is because there's this fear of the unknown. What am I going to do if dad does this? What am I going to do if mom says that? What if they come at me angrily? What if they dismiss me, or they deflect, or they blame, or they cry? Oh my goodness, all the guys are like, oh, what if she starts crying? How do I keep this, from completely derailing? So I plan that out too. I plan, what will I say? I have background with these people, right? So even just last week, I had to have a conversation with some parents, and I know dad. We have a history, and he does come in, and he comes in hot, and he comes in with all of his research and all of his things. So I knew how to frame that conversation. And I said, okay, so what about when he says this? How am I going to react? What am I going to say to keep us on track? And that's really what it is. It's not, what am I going to say to defend myself? It's, what am I going to say to keep this conversation on track, productive, helpful, and still towards that same outcome. What am I going to do when mom starts crying? I mean, I have had, moms that just fall apart in the middle of a meeting, and you're thinking, what do I do now? So how do I come to mom and say, hey, I can see that this is really tough information for you to process right now, and I'm okay with stopping. Do you need a minute to regroup, or do you, want to go get a drink, walk around? We can start again in a few minutes. Just knowing what you're going to say when you get that reaction is a really critical part of that preparation. And then the final piece of preparation is, how am I going to end it to make sure it doesn't go on for an hour and 15 minutes and we're going around that circle conversation? How am I going to make sure that we end it well? So I think through that too. So I think planning our communication, knowing what type of communicator we are going to be, what we want to be, how we want to be perceived, asking a million clarifying questions. Did I hear you say? So when you say that, what is your intention? What is your hope? What is your desired outcome for your child? Doing all of that in the meeting does not happen unless I've had that really prayerful, meaningful content before I ever sit down with them.
Yeah. And I think too, what I really like about your template is that it gives you almost a mindset more so, because sometimes you can plan these conversations and you're going to book a meeting with the parent, but there's going to be other times where the parent just walks into your classroom and says, hey, can we talk for a minute? And if you haven't really set your mind in how you're going to handle those ones are probably easier to go off the rails because you weren't expecting them. Has that been your experience as well?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you have the parent who, you've got 20 kids coming into your classroom, and you got to take lunch count and do attendance and all this. And the parent goes, hey, do you have a minute?
Yep.
And at that time, I mean, I have said before, you know what? I need to put my attention on the kiddos right now. Do you have a lunch break that I could give you a call? I mean, it's not that I want to put them off completely, or I might say, "Hey, could you do this? Will you send me an email? I want to make sure that I have an understanding about why you want to meet, and so I want to make sure I'm prepared. So, will you just send me a quick email with a couple bullet points, and then what time would work after school to meet?" So I'll, not dismiss them, but I'll make sure that they're also going to be able to have my full attention. And if I have a classroom full of kids, that's not the time for me to sit down and have a really productive meeting with this parent. And so I'll do that, because I know that those impromptus happen. So have I thought before about, what do I want to say when the impromptu comes? Absolutely. And what have I done? I've written it out before. And this is just years and years of learning and working with people.
That's so smart to kind of plan it all out. And I think we all go into those conversations. We rehearse it in our head a bunch, but that's very different than writing it out. That's very different than saying, here, here are the three things we need to accomplish. And I would imagine that one of those three things is not the parents need to agree with everything I say. I imagine
Mhm.
you have a lot of these conversations and you leave still not, you're not totally in agreement, but you had the conversation that you needed to have. And how do you handle that, I guess? Like when you go through, here are the three things we planned, we get out of this meeting and the parents are still not totally in the same spot as you.
Mhm. So if I'm, kind of at that next level meeting, which last week's meeting was, we were kind of there. That's when I used an S bar, and that's a concept that I read about, learned about quite some time ago, and it was totally on an unrelated thing. I was reading the book "Turn the Ship Around," and it's an awesome leadership book about communication and the guy's on a nuclear submarine where communication cannot go wrong, right? It's a tough, high stress situation. So they were talking about how they used S-bar communication, and it started in the military. And then, this concept of S-bar, it was picked up by hospitals and medical corporations because, like, wow, if we communicate in this way, we're communicating clearly. There's no question, there's no room for error. We're just communicating really well. So they started implementing it in medical organizations. And I said, well, this really could have an application in education too. And so, just to really quickly unpack what that is, SBAR stands for Situation Background Assessment Recommendation. So that is how I queue up my difficult conversations with parents. And I walk in with a single piece of paper for everybody in the room that says, here's the situation, here are the 3 points, this is what we're dealing with in the classroom, or this is the challenge that we're facing right now. Then I go to the background, and that's where we say, okay, so here's what we've done in the classroom. These are the strategies, the interventions. These are the things that we've tried. This is what we've experienced. And then you move to the assessment, and that's kind of that open conversation where you spend maybe 10, 12 minutes allowing the parents to share their thoughts, how they encounter it at home or what they think you should do. And it's not a time to argue or say why that won't work or yeah, we tried that. That's just, I'm like writing down and validating the parent, okay, that they would like us to try this or they want to hear about that or would this work? And then we move to R, that's recommendation. And I already have those bullet points outlined before the meeting ever begins. And yes, we've tweaked them before, in the midst of one of those conversations, but it basically says, for continued enrollment, here's our recommendations. We're going to do this and this and this. We're encouraging you to reach out for evaluation for your student, or we need you to do X, Y, Z. And then the bottom is when is our next meeting? So we plan it out, before we even leave the room. So I can end a conversation with them saying, we've had a really productive conversation today, and it sounds like both of us have some good steps. And I think we all are still aligned in our common goal for your kiddo that we want him to be successful in the classroom. So it's not this perfect tied up in a bow, it's over and done with kind of resolution. They need to know that this is not like a one and done. Okay, I said it and now they're not even paying attention to me anymore. They're not looking for, a resolution that would be ongoing. So I think when you walk into a meeting and you have something so clearly outlined, there's no room for miscommunication because it is black and white clarity right in front of them. And by doing that too, what it does is it really diffuses the emotion in the room as well. They see it. They don't have to question my intentions, my hopes for the meeting. So it really kind of diffuses when you sit down and this is all you have to kind of talk through. So, so that as far, I mean, I'm writing it out ahead of time, and I'll go ahead and put my plug in for writing with pen and paper. I'm sure you guys know the research that typing does not have the same impact on our brain and our memory and our cognitive function that taking a pen to paper really does. And I find that that is the most effective way to remember the things that I wanted to say, that I wanted to talk about. Because if I type it out, I kind of forget. So I write it out and then I type out the S bar, and then that's how I have all of those little ding ding. That's what I wanted to talk about, in that meeting. So that's all part of that preparation process.
Yeah, this topic, there is so much to unpack, and I know we're kind of coming up on our time here, but we might need to bring you back for part two here, Angela. I think there's a lot more we could keep on chatting about, but I think probably as people are listening to this, if they have something on the horizon, we know that, I mean, you can couch absolutely everything in prayer. Praying before the conversation, during the conversation, after the conversation is critical. With all of the strategies that you've given to us today, I certainly hope and pray that people are able to grab some tips from all of this. Angela, would it be all right if we included your email in the show notes here? If people wanted
Absolutely.
your presentation or your template you talked about or any other support, that would be great. Yeah, we just really appreciate you joining us today. And I think, we absolutely should be talking about a part two on this one. So
Yeah.
we'll be in touch.
For sure, for sure. Well, it's something that, we have to recognize that the Lord is with us through this all, especially if we seek him in prayer. And just like in Exodus 4, he gave Moses the words. I think those same prayers that we might have, I believe that, he helps us through those tough conversations. But it's something it would be weird to maybe say I love doing it, because certainly we don't love having hard conversations, but I love to help people and coach people through it, because it's something that I think the more we practice and the more we do, the better we can get, and we can kind of diffuse some of our own emotions about having those, and kind of more approach them with some courage, and be productive and helpful in maintaining our relationships with families in our schools.
Awesome. Good. Well, yeah, thank you again for joining us today. And hey, Rob, you want to close us out in prayer on this one?
I would love to.
All right.
Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for Angela and for the gifts that you've given her. Thank you for the tough conversations and for the good conversations. Please be with us as we continue to serve in your kingdom, and be with us as we have those courageous conversations in our future. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.